All right, Tom Scavetta here with Katelyn McCarthy, reoccurring guest of Big Blue Avenue. Katelyn, how are you?
Fantastic. How are you doing?
Awesome, awesome. I know you're a diehard Baltimore Ravens fan, but you had an awesome opportunity this summer to work for the Carolina Panthers. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what it was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was honestly more than I ever expected it to be. Just going to training camp practice every single day. I mean, it was brutal, it was hot, I was dying, sweating, dripping, but it was just so amazing to be around all the guys every day. And I mean, you really kind of get to know them, not just, watching them every Sunday. You really get to know the kind of guys they are, especially those rookies like Ickey, and the newcomers. It's a really great experience and definitely a once in a lifetime experience that I'm so happy and blessed I was able to receive.
Yeah, congratulations on that experience. That's awesome. Very excited for you about that. Now, obviously, the drama that was going on this summer is who was going to start at quarterback. Although I feel like almost everybody probably knew who it was going to be. What was that atmosphere like? Obviously, before the Sam Darnold injury, the Baker Mayfield versus Sam Darnold competition.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it everyone knew it was gonna be Baker. I mean, I felt they weren't gonna bring in Baker for no reason. They already had three quarterbacks on their roster. Why are you going to add a fourth if you're not going to start him? I would say that Matt Rule really tried to give them both the opportunities. It wasn't like Baker Mayfield's only getting first team reps. It started off on the first day of camp, it was Sam. Next day was Baker's. It was very alternative, but I think after that first preseason game against the Washington Commanders, they really knew they wanted it to be Baker. Um, and obviously it was. And it was just interesting to see because earlier also on in training camp, Matt Rule's like, I want to keep three quarterbacks, in which you obviously don't really see that much. But you drafted Matt Corral in the third round this past year. You brought in Baker. You brought in Sam Darnold last year, and PJ Walker's not, too old on this team either. They're all pretty new guys, and I feel like the Panthers have just really struggled to find their franchise quarterback. And I'm still really not convinced, especially after week one, that Baker is going to be that guy.
Speaking of week one, let's talk about Baker Mayfield and his performance briefly. So the Panthers lost the season opener to the Cleveland Browns, Baker's former team, in what was supposedly a revenge game. But um, I believe there was like 8 seconds left, and there was a 58-yard field goal that wound up winning the Browns the game. But the fourth quarter, Baker was pretty impressive, I thought. 13-point deficit. He threw that 75-yard touchdown pass to Robbie Anderson, which I thought was good. But I do think the negatives definitely outweigh the positives in this first game. We saw 5 tipped passes, 4 mishandled snaps, which luckily were all recovered by the Panthers. But do you think that the Cleveland game, the fact that he went up against Cleveland, combined with learning a new offense in his first game as a Panther, contributed to maybe the additional pressure that was on him that might have led to this, subpar performance?
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't even just the Browns. I like we mentioned a little bit before when we were talking. I was at the Ravens game. They had a slow start. Other teams had a slow start. It's week one. I feel like you can't really determine the whole season off week one. And that's what Baker said in the press conference, too. Like, there's 16 more games. But what we saw in Baker the first three quarters was the Baker we've always seen, the guy throwing interceptions, not being accurate, um, not really handling pressure in the pocket well. And that's what we saw. But in the fourth quarter, we saw definitely an improved Baker. And I mean, he did come here in the beginning of July. He had to learn that whole playbook like a week or two before training camp started. So to be fair, I wouldn't put all the blame on him. And there is a new offense coordinator, Ben McAdoo, the former Giants coach. So I think there's just a lot of changes to that offense, and also like an offensive line that's totally different than last year. You got first round draft pick Ickey Ekwonu, which definitely has been a spotlight of this offense. But that right side, especially, I noticed was looking really rough. They just don't have. I feel like they don't have that right combination on the line. And like you mentioned, all those mishandled snaps. they need Bradley Bozeman, and hopefully his injury from training camp, he'll be able to start. I mean, he's a very good veteran guy that helped the Ravens so much when he was on their team. But like again, you can't. I feel like you can't blame Baker, at least not right now. They are playing the Giants this week, and you're gonna have to see how he does. I feel like division games are really the one to tell how he's gonna perform in those games. But definitely a lot of talk and a lot of pressure from the media, especially about facing his former team. And like you mentioned, the Browns scored a 58-yard field goal with 8 seconds left, and that's why you draft kickers. I've always been about drafting kickers since the Ravens got Justin Tucker, but and that was a defensive problem. The defense couldn't stop them with 90 seconds to go. So I think it was just like a lot of problems for the Panthers.
And one other problem, obviously, Andre Roberts getting hurt, placed on injured reserve. Who do you think steps up in his place? Because obviously, core special teams guy who the Panthers are definitely going to miss.
Yeah, a good veteran guy, and I feel like he even proved throughout training camp. But someone that also is getting a lot of kick returns in training camp was Shi Smith. He's a younger guy, smaller guy. He's really fast and athletic. I could see him going there because I know CJ Saunders had a really good training camp before he got injured, but I'm not really sure when he's going to be back. So I would expect to see Shi Smith in return for Andre Roberts.
Now, Christian McCaffrey is a guy also coming off an injury last year, a player that a lot of Panther fans want to be their A-level player on the whole football team. Do you think he can get back to that form? Because we saw, at least this past Sunday, the Giants did a job on Derrick Henry, holding him to 82 yards. Credit to Wink Martindale once again. But just how do you see McCaffrey, not just this Sunday against the Giants, but this upcoming season that we're in, that we just started? What do you expect from him? Do you expect the old Christian McCaffrey, or are you kind of hesitant to put that label back on him?
I'm honestly hesitant to see that he had a shin injury right before week 1. And, he's only played 10 games in the last 2 seasons. He just seems very fragile, and it's going to be really hard to see if he gets to that form. Running backs don't really last as long as they did previous years in the NFL. So he's just very injury prone. At training camp, they would have him practice one day and then off another. They were really taking it slow with him. They don't want to rush him back. But I was surprised to see that he only had around 30 yards, not really making a big impact on the Panthers offense. Like, again, week 1. But the way that the Giants defense was able to stop Derrick Henry, I am a little concerned for Christian McCaffrey and especially fantasy owners, because I know in my fantasy draft, I did not want to pick McCaffrey because I was a little nervous with his injuries. And I have to say, so far in week 1, I'm really happy I chose Jonathan Taylor because he really picked up right where he left off.
Absolutely. Jonathan Taylor is a fantastic player. And the way you feel about McCaffrey is the way I felt about Barkley before Sunday. That is obviously McCaffrey a year older than Barkley. But I think the fact that, you mentioned the right side of the Panthers line is concerning with guys like Taylor Moton over there. I know they drafted Brady Christensen not so long ago, so maybe he could fill the void. Who knows? But the Giants have that now with 2 bookend tackles and Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas. So the battle of potentially the two top tackles in this year's draft, Evan Neal and Ickey Ekwonu. What did you learn about Ickey this summer? And what did you see from him that you hope will translate into year 1? Especially, I'm not so sure if Kayvon Thibodeau is going to play again on Sunday, but Ickey's going to have his hands full with Leonard Williams, Azeez Ojulari, whoever it might be.
Yeah, Ickey Ekwonu definitely was a player that really developed through training camp. A lot of people described him as, he was just really eager and, needed to be a little bit more patient on the line. He kind of just was a little quick to jump or things like that. But, he's just somebody that really is improving this line because of how much of a disaster it was last year. I think they had the most sacks last year, a lot of things wrong just on that offense. But I really think he could add to it. And I think he really showed himself in the preseason, special Patriots game, had a nice pancake block. So he's just someone I'm really excited to see, and I got to get to know him in camp. Just a really nice guy. And he's a Charlotte native too, and he played at NC State. It, like, all came together for him. I think he's going to be one of those guys that is not going to be a disappointing first round draft pick. And I don't think he played bad at all at his first NFL game. Obviously, some mistakes. He's a rookie. He's going to make mistakes, but overall, just I think I don't think it's going to be too hard of a task for him. I mean, he did have Myles Garrett on his hands this past week, so I think he's just going to have to keep working at it every single week.
Yeah, I think Garrett had at least 2 sacks on Sunday, but I mean, back to Ickey for a second. I think he's, out of the 3 in this class, the best pure left tackle, right? Because Neal's playing the right side, and Charles Cross is a whole different story out of Texas A&M.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but you did Brady Christensen, and Christensen was playing at that left tackle spot. And during training camp, everyone's like, Ekwonu, 6th overall, they're going to start him. But like, Ekwonu really needed to work for that left tackle spot. And for a while, and for that first preseason game, they wanted Brady Christensen there. But then I think Ickey really stepped it up, and that's why he is that left tackle spot, and that's what he was doing at NC State, and really transitioned it over to the pros.
I think it's interesting too, because we'll probably see it more with Ickey than Evan Neal, because Evan Neal's playing on the right side. I think Ickey's going to go through a lot of the growing pains that Andrew Thomas went through his rookie season, because Andrew Thomas was awful the first 8 games of 2020. He was really bad, and now this past weekend, he was the 3rd-ranked left tackle on PFF. I mean, 31 pass blocking snaps, only 1 pressure. Evan Neal only gave up 1 pressure as well. So I think manning down that left tackle side is definitely more of a challenge than something that Evan Neal has to do, right? You're not going up. I know edge rushers will switch sides sometimes at that 5-tech position, but I'm looking at Brian Burns. I'm looking at Kayvon Thibodeau, pass rushers for each team respectively. And both of these rookie tackles will absolutely have their hands full on Sunday. But I want to get to your thoughts on Wink Martindale, because it just seems like the Giants are recruiting Baltimore Ravens left and right. First, Jihad Ward, even guys on the offensive side of the ball. Tyre Phillips. We had Jalen Moore for a cup of coffee. A couple other players.
Tony might be on the practice squad.
He
right?
is, yeah.
Tony Jefferson's great. He deserves to be on a starting roster, but I mean, he is a veteran. He's getting a little old, but he was, when the Ravens went down with everybody ever last year, he really stepped it up. And I thought they were going to sign him to the Ravens practice squad, but the Giants got him before. But yeah, a lot of people on the Ravens are going to the Giants, and especially on defense. And I really liked Wink Martindale when he was on the Ravens, and I was sad to see him go, but he really developed a defense. I think the Ravens were always a team that was known for their good defense, and I think Martindale really just added to that. And I think the Giants defense did really good, especially just playing away for your first game. And the Titans, were the number 1 seed, obviously didn't do too well in the playoffs, but, they were that top seed last year, and the Giants went in there and stopped them. And I think just the drive that showed out the most to me was that last drive. I mean, I thought there was some terrible play calling for the Titans offense, and why are you kneeling and before a field goal. And I mean,
tight end sweep when you have Derrick Henry.
Yeah, it's like, why don't you just try to get a few more yards? But I mean, not my team. So, I think it's something the Giants needed a little more push, and I think Martindale could give that to them.
I think Wink was the DC for you guys for 4 years, and the first 3 years, it was a top 7 defense. I think it was 1st in 2018, 4th in 2019, and then 7th in 2020. And then unfortunately last season, I think Wink gets a lot of the blame, but the Ravens were hit, in my opinion, at least the hardest with the injury bug last year in the National Football League, without their 2 top corners. And that really hurt Wink's scheme, because when you look at Wink's scheme, it's a blitzkrieg type of scheme, as you know, and you need good corners. And that's why when Blake Martinez was cut by the Giants last week, I wasn't all that shell-shocked as most fans were, because Wink and his defensive scheme doesn't pay linebackers at a premium like Blake Martinez, right? I mean, look at the Ravens inside linebackers, Patrick Queen on a rookie deal. I forget who the other one is. You can tell me. I'm drawing a blank for some reason.
I'm blanking. Oh my
Ravens
God.
run a 3-4, or are they interchangeable?
Oh, they're 3-4.
3-4, yeah.
Yeah.
I know LJ Fort is in there as well. Fort
And
might be
Malik
off the team.
Harrison
Malik
also
Harrison, yeah.
is one of them, which is also on a rookie deal. He got drafted a couple years ago. I think
Cost control deals.
Yeah.
As where Blake was making a whole lot of money, but
yeah, we have like younger guys on the front seven.
So I think with that being said, what challenges could Wink pose to Baker on Sunday, knowing the type of quarterback that he is and knowing the type of defensive coordinator that Wink is?
Well, I mean, you mentioned how much he likes to blitz. I think that line is really going to struggle with blitzing on Sunday. I think Baker is still a little bit too slow to release, the ball and things like that. I feel like he was just holding on the ball for like ever. It seemed like I don't think he does well in the pocket at all. I feel like he doesn't really scramble well. So I think a lot of blitzing. I think also I think in the whole football league, honestly, one of the most underrated receivers is DJ Moore. He does not get the credit that he deserves. He's kind of more a quiet guy. He's had over 1,100 yards in the past 3 seasons, and I really think he could be that number one guy. I mean, obviously not on Sunday. It was Robbie Anderson, which he struggled last year, but I would pay a lot of attention to DJ Moore. That will be an interesting matchup against that Giants secondary, and because I feel like they're all going to try to go for Christian McCaffrey. But DJ Moore is really that underrated guy. And then also Tommy Tremble, or the tight end, second year of Notre Dame. I'm really excited to see him. He's going to have a good season. He's a good blocking, but he also could catch and, go down the field for a touchdown. So I think those two guys are going to be someone to really look out for other than CMC.
Yeah, Tommy Tremble. I'm a huge Notre Dame fan, so Tremble was a pleasure to watch while he was there. So I was happy he got drafted by the Panthers, or just in general for that matter. But I guess, how do you evaluate head coach Matt Rule heading into his 3rd season? I'm never one to say that one game defines a season, but I'm sitting here looking at this banner I have below, and it just looks strange to me. I mean, the Giants haven't been 1-0 in forever since I think I was a senior in college. But at what point does that first game start to define where your season is headed? Because we've seen in the past 1-0 and 0-1 could have a complete 180 on your team where your confidence is great, and 0-1 could be like, do you think that Matt Rule is on the hot seat this year?
Absolutely. I mean, it is his 3rd year. Like the first year he was here, I feel like, they didn't do well. It was a COVID year. I think everything was a little messed up everywhere, obviously, in the whole world. Last year, you start 3-0. Sam Darnold goes down. Then you're doing PJ Walker. And then you got Cam Newton. And then you're like, Cam Newton's terrible. I'm going to go back to PJ Walker. And now it's a whole new season. And, you thought Sam Darnold's going to be your guy. I think, obviously, when Matt Corral got drafted, nobody thought that was going to be the number one guy. But then you bring in Baker. I feel like there's just so much, like, you have no consistency in your quarterback. They haven't had a consistent franchise quarterback since Cam Newton the first time around in, like, 2015 when they went to the Super Bowl. And I feel like it really starts there. You need your consistent quarterback that's going to win you games, lead your offense, and they don't have a leader. I think if the Panthers don't do good this year, Baker doesn't do good this year, I don't think Baker's going to stay there. Like, how much longer is he going to stay, But like you mentioned, especially as a fan, if I start 0-1, I just think the season's over. There's such a big difference between starting 1-0 and 0-1, no matter who you play. Ravens just play the Jets. I don't care. We started 1-0. That's all I care about. Because last year we played the Raiders in a really close game, 0-1, and I really think that's why we just sucked for the rest of the year. I think it's just a momentum starter for that year. And before the Giants won last week, I thought this was a very winnable game for the Panthers. And then I watched, the highlights of the Giants game, and I was like, Okay, they improved. They look better. The Panthers not so sold on them. So I would definitely have to say rules on the hot seat. You got to be at least 500 um, to stay as a coach. And honestly, I really liked him. Very nice guy. You know, wasn't a coach that felt like, he put anyone under the bus. I don't like coaches like that. I like, your team kind of thing. And he was that guy. But I don't know if like the pro level is for him. Obviously, what he's
Right.
done at or what he did at Baylor, it's just not really working out too well. But I could be wrong.
I think part of the problem is that Tom Brady's still in the Division One. The
Yeah.
Saints still have a really good defense too, and I mean, you have the Atlanta Falcons, but I mean, the Panthers are expected to be far better than them.
Hmm.
Um, and I think now watching Sunday's Giants game, and I think what would really concern me if I'm a Carolina fan is that the Giants brought in a coaching staff of Brian Dable and Mike Kafka, who both led pass-heavy offenses, and they ran the ball like maniacs. The Saquon Barkley, they utilized the running game to perfection because the Titans were only doing a box of 8 guys or more on 5% of Saquon's runs. So the pass-heavy offense took advantage of that, and I feel like the Giants coaching staff got more out of a weaker roster
Hmm.
than the better roster we had last year. So I think that's what would concern me as a Carolina fan. The Giants coaching is light years better than it was last year. We're not having Jason Garrett call these vanilla plays, right?
Hmm.
We're not doing a QB sneak on 3rd and 9 anymore. But what is your key to the game for the Panthers? What's one thing they must absolutely have to nail in order to beat the Giants on Sunday?
They need to force at least one turnover. They didn't force any week one, and I believe I could be wrong. They had like 7 interceptions last year. They were on the lower end of interceptions. Did they not force turnovers? And that hurts. That hurts any team because that was the Ravens last year. They couldn't they couldn't. I can't say that word for some reason. Force turnovers. And I mean the secondary is. I think it's a little underrated too. But also that was a secondary that was banged up. I mean you had J.C.
Right.
Horn that came in as a rookie last year, but he was done for the season after week 3. He's back now. He didn't really have his best game. Allowed 2 big passes to Amari Cooper. We also got Jeremy Chin, a young guy. You brought in Xavier Woods. That's a little bit of a veteran guy. Like this secondary is strong when they're healthy, but that missing piece that they need is to force turnovers. I don't know
There it is again.
that.
I have my own thing with the STS. I have trouble pronouncing that all the time, so it's all good. So who concerns you the most on the Giants? Maybe one player on each side of the ball, like that you think could really take over this game and put the Panthers in some trouble.
I mean, if Saquon Barkley plays the way that he did against the Titans, even though
Mhm.
I'm not so sold on the Titans defense, but the way that the Panthers front 7 played on against the Browns was not really what I expected either. Because you got some veteran guys like Shaq Thompson, but Shaq missed the entire training camp, and I think that really affected him. When I was there at training camp, I didn't think it did, but it's so much different when you're on the sidelines and when you're actually playing. Because he was a guy that was coaching, the other defensive guys. He was in there. I feel like he was more involved than a regular player that was hurt and had to watch. Um, so they had 16 missed tackles, that defense on Sunday, 4 of them by Frankie Louvu, which is also another older guy. But they really just got to complete their tackles because that was ridiculous. You're not going to win games missing 16 tackles. Um, on the defense, it depends because like Kayvon Thibodeau plays. I don't know, like that the way he played it in college makes me a little concerned. But those are 2 guys I'd want to watch out. If Thibodeau doesn't play again, though, I might feel a little better about the Panthers' offense going against them.
I think for me, I'm concerned about DJ Moore for the same reasons that you mentioned before. Big body receiver. Outside of Adoree Jackson, our corners stink. We saw Darnay Holmes almost coughed up the game for us.
Yeah.
Aaron Robinson wasn't exposed much on Sunday, but that could be a concern. It's more like he's not great because he's a young corner type of thing, not because he's a bad corner. But and then the second one is Brian Burns, in my opinion. 9 sacks, 2 consecutive years, really good young player out of Florida State, explosive first step. And I think if he'll probably be matched up against Andrew Thomas most of the day, but if he's able to do some stunt moves and get in on Ben Bredesen, another former Raven, I
Yeah.
think that's a weakness for the Giants, starting left guard. It's a rotation between Ben Bredesen, among others. So I think if Burns is able to get to the quarterback, that could pose some problems because we saw Daniel Jones fumble once on Sunday. So for me, I think that's the biggest thing for me. And I guess those are my 2 players to watch because Moore, again, good big body, and Burns for the reasons I just said. Anybody that flies under the radar for you for Carolina specifically, like one guy that might not be talked about a whole lot, maybe a rookie young player that you think could make a play or two in this game?
Yeah. Brandon Smith is a rookie. He a linebacker, second string, but I think he really excelled in training camp, and he may get more playing time as the season goes on. I'm trying to think. He didn't really. Terrace Marshall Jr., the receiver, young guy, very athletic, good route runner. He didn't play on Sunday because Matt Rule said that the offense wasn't on the field as much, and he's not the number one guys are DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and he wasn't on the field. But the way he played in training camp was amazing. I was really impressed by him. I know that the Panthers were getting calls about him, and I also want to see Rashard Higgins play this week. He didn't really play on Sunday either because that's Baker had him in Cleveland. So I think that could give him a little bit more chemistry, because he didn't have the best passing game. So I think, and they had that chemistry in camp too. So I don't know why they're not putting him on the field a little bit more because that they've played together.
Mm-hmm.
That's that one, it's a brand new system, but that's that one guy you had the other 4 year, the other couple years you were in Cleveland. So, I think all of the Panthers receivers are a little bit underrated. I mean, and they have depth. They have
Right.
depth in that position. So I just want to see them use a little bit more of the receivers. I didn't really like that they weren't putting in Higgins and Terrace Marshall Jr. on Sunday.
I do think having Higgins back would help a lot. And if they have Marshall, yeah, Giants secondary, look out. That's going to be tough to match. But Katelyn, one final question. Who wins?
I think the Giants. But I think it's gonna be a close game. I really think the Panthers are gonna put in their best effort, but I'm only taking the Giants because they're at MetLife. And when I was at MetLife last week, it was extremely loud. A lot of fans showed up, and I think that Giants fans are just so excited. They didn't start this season 0-1. I think the fans are going to show up. It's going to be a good atmosphere for the Big Blue. So I think the Panthers are going to lose this game, and it's going to be a little bit of a rough season because their schedule only gets harder. I mean, they have to play the Ravens week 11. So.
Right. I think my biggest concern for the Giants is after a win like this, sometimes there's a little bit of a hangover and you lose the next week that you're supposed to win. So I think that's what concerns me. And personally, going into the season, if you told me the Giants would start 2-0, I would lose my mind. But here we are, a few days after the game. I think the Giants win by like a field goal again. I think it's a close game. I don't think Baker Mayfield or Daniel Jones will look necessarily great, but all in all, I think the Giants squeeze one out somehow, some way, and go 2-0 into that Dallas game, which without Dak, which really, I guess, scares me in a sense because the Giants 2-0. It doesn't make sense, but I guess
I mean, their schedule, but like if you look at the Giants' schedule, it's not a tough one, you know. They play the Cowboys and then they play the Bears week 4, right? And
yeah,
those games are all at home. So like, you know, if that MetLife Stadium gets packed with all those Giants fans, I think that's gonna make a difference too.
yeah. I mean, we probably lose one of them, but who knows? If again, I'm trying to take this week by week, but man, that would be awesome. The
You're
Carolina
losing
Panthers.
6 against
Yeah.
the Ravens. I can tell you that. You're losing that one.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We do play is this year.
Yeah, in New York.
The extra game because it's fourth place game. Yeah,
Mhm.
out of conference against placement.
Because
Yeah.
like the second time in my life as being a fan since 2008, the Ravens finished in 4th place, and I was like, "What is this?" I've never I'm not used to that, you know. Like I was like, "What is that?"
Caitlin, I want to thank you so much for hopping on the
Yeah.
show here. Where can people find you and your work before I let you sign off?
Yeah, so I'm starting up in Syracuse at CNY Central. I'm doing college sports, more Syracuse ACC stuff, so not pro. But if you Google Katelyn McCarthy and CNY Central, it'll pop up in a few weeks when I get started.
Awesome. Well, Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck to your Ravens on Sunday, and best of luck to the Panthers as well. Not too much luck, but we'll see what happens. And yeah, that was Katelyn McCarthy. I'm Tom Scavetta, and we'll go right back to Big Blue Avenue.